recording now, so you guys can go onto YouTube to check if it's working. Okay, it has started. So let me just try to copy the link so you guys don't have to go to YouTube to go and dig it out. Okay, so I sent the link in the chat, so let me know what the health of the stream is. So this is Font Awesome. So they actually have icons. You see, it's similar to what you have like on icons 8 or flat icons. You guys know icons 8 and flat icons by now, right?
Yes, and YouTube is working as well.
Okay, thank you. So what icons 8 and flat icon does is they just give you some set of icons, but in that case you have to first download the file, right, or copy the SVG of the file, and then it's when you do that you'll be able to use it in your project. But for Font Awesome is a little bit different, because what you just need to begin to use Font Awesome in your project is a link that you're going to put in the head of your project, and that's what I just did here. This link tag is what makes those icons available to me. So let me just open that link in my browser so that you can see what is coming out. So you can see this is a very massive, it's basically a massive CSS file. Can you see that?
Yeah,
and it is this CSS file that actually provides, but this is a minified file though. What I mean by minified file means it has been reduced drastically. No, it's not actually minified, it's actually a regular CSS file, just that the way it is being written is slightly different. So let me just inside of the file, I want to copy everything in the file so that I can paste it in and format it correctly so you guys can see that it's actually a CSS file. So let me copy it, and then where is that? Let's go to our VS Code and let me just create font awesome.css. This is illegal to do though. Because not illegal per se, you could do it, but it's as long as you reference the owner of the project or the author of the project is fine. Okay, it's actually been cut off, so let me try to copy from the start and copy properly this time. So it's a very massive file, so let me just copy it and see if I can paste it correctly this time. So but it's actually a very long one. You can see it's basic. Can you see it's actually a CSS file? Can you see that? So it's a CSS file,
yes,
but it is being delivered from a link. So whenever you have files delivered from links like that, could be an image, could be anything, it is called a CDN. It's delivered through a CDN rather. So those files are delivered through a content delivery network. So when you see frameworks for CSS like Bootstrap, they are also delivered over a CDN. So you could decide to copy this entire thing and put it inside of your project and use it locally. So instead of just using this entire link here in my HTML, I could just say link, the normal way I would link the CSS, I could just say link font awesome.css, and it's going to work just the same. Does that make sense? So but you can see here that they are using the pseudo classes, and this pseudo classes, the content are actually this is it Unicode? Yeah, the Unicode. And if you've read about Unicodes before, Unicodes are basically special entities that you use in HTML. You remember that I mentioned that before at some point in the future, where you could create special characters like space bar, space, the space character, or you could create things like the copyright sign. You remember we did all of those before. So that's the very same thing this content and property in your CSS is doing. So let me just close the font awesome file and delete it, since we are serving it over a CDN. But if you are working without internet, it is okay for you to actually visit this link and get your font awesome file. You can copy it and make it local if you'll be working without the internet. But since we have the internet, we don't actually need it. But let me just close it. So we have the font awesome file, but it also needs JavaScript enablement for it to be able to work. So there's a JavaScript file also for font awesome that you have to make available in order for you to be able to use it. And while we are still talking about this CDN, so let me just quickly bring in a CSS framework that is being delivered over a CDN, and it's called what's it called? Yeah, it's called Bootstrap. Why do I forget the pronunciation of Bootstrap today of all this? So let me just go to google.com. So I will just search out that link. I expect that it takes me to so I want to do So basically, and I would really like it if you guys can go over this, at your own time. Get Bootstrap. Let me just do this first. So get Bootstrap. Bootstrap is basically a CSS framework. So think about this, guys. I'm Yetunde did this particular project. This project we are on now, she designed it, right? With you guys, but I think she completed it. So you guys did it, but she completed it. But basically, I said Yetunde did it because it was on her computer. So being on a computer, what if all I have access to is this CSS file inside of the project that you guys did? Let's say this is all I have access to. Can I still use this CSS file inside of another HTML? Will it be useful for other HTML projects? This particular CSS file.
It would only be useful if it has the classes also defined in the HTML.
Exactly, that's very accurate. So that means in order for you to make this CSS useful, you have to be able to take a sneak peek into the file and know what the classes are called. Then you know what styles apply to specific classes. Then you can now apply it to maybe a new HTML document you're creating, because you at that point know that okay, this particular class name makes this button centralized, or this particular class name gives a background of black or something like that. So once you are able to know what the CSS property definition does, or CSS definition does, then you can be able to apply that class to any other, or that ID to any other HTML element, whether in this project or in a different project. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So that's the fundamental idea behind CSS frameworks. So CSS frameworks are actually predefined CSS files that you now have to learn what the class names that have been defined inside of that predefined file is or are. Then you can now apply it inside of your own fresh HTML document. That it's possible for you to, with a CSS framework, build an entire project without writing a single line of CSS, provided you know the appropriate class definitions. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that's exactly what frameworks like Bootstrap is all about. So what they are all about is they have predefined CSS class names, and then you can just import those class names into your HTML project using this CDN. So once you import them as such, you can now use the classes defined by Bootstrap. And Bootstrap was created by Twitter, by the way. So you can use the classes defined by Bootstrap, and then when you use those classes defined by Bootstrap in your project, all of the rule sets applied and the styles applied to those classes will be applied to your elements. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let me just get let me get the Bootstrap CDN, for instance. So this is the CSS CDN, and they have a JavaScript CDN as well. So let me just put it at the top of our project, and let me call it Bootstrap. And I just want to show you this now before we go into all of that, because I should have shown you this a long time ago. But so this is Bootstrap CSS only. So let's go to our tip calculator now, and let me just comment out every other thing we have. So let me make it look as though it's just a clean project with nothing defined. So let me minimize this a little bit. So the moment I do that, you can see we have a blank a blank document. But let me just write H1 and say hello. My hello. So you can I think the other CSS is still in play. That's why we have this kind of font. So let me comment out that CDN CSS as well. So you can see we have a font applied here. Now you can see that this is not the way when you have raw HTML written inside of your HTML code. This is not how it gets rendered in the browser. You can see that we actually have some styling available here. You can see that the default margin on the header tag is no longer there, right? It is not available. And just to let you know what I mean, I will just comment out this Bootstrap CDN that I imported, and you will see what happens now. Can you see now? Hello?
Yes, sir.
You see there's slightly a difference between what it looked like before, while I had it not commented out, and what it looks like when I had it commented out. See, there's a difference, right? Hello.
Yes.
Yes, so that difference exists because I already have Bootstrap active in my project. So let me just comment it back in, and you will see that it goes back to the top. So now see how interesting Bootstrap is. So here's what I just need to do. I would just do something like, okay, let me create a button, for instance, a button element. I just create a normal button element and I say click me. So you can see the button still looks ugly as the normal HTML buttons look. But the moment I begin to add classes to it, I have to know what classes are available inside of the Bootstrap framework. And let's see the classes available. And I'm doing this, I already know the classes, many of them, because I've been using them for quite some time now. But I want to show you how you can actually dig into the framework to know what styles are already defined and what classes have been defined already. So let's go to the components. I think that's under examples. No, okay, should be under docs, and then I think we need to find component. Yeah, component. So we have components now, and then under components you will have different things. So what I'm targeting at this point in time is nothing but buttons. So I want to target buttons, and you guys will understand this in a while because we'll be using it a lot, because we need to be building our UI faster while we are trying to learn JavaScript. So you can see we have btn primary, and btn primary is what we create this blue button. You never have to write a line of CSS, you just need to apply this style. So let me just copy this style now and apply it. Let me go back to our project and apply it to this click button I have, and let me just bring this to the side so you can see it. So let me just apply it here, and the moment I apply it, see what happens. You see we have that exact same button defined by this Bootstrap team, right? So we have other variants, but the base class that you have to apply to define that it is a button, this kind of button, is that you have to define this btn class first of all, right? So this btn class, base class for every class, button classes. So the moment I remove this primary, you will see that blue background is out, but you can see the default HTML button style is gone, and you can see I also have hover effect on top of this button. Can you guys see that? Hello? Hello? Okay, here we go again. Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
You guys can see that, right? Hello?
Yes, sir.
You can see that now I have some style on my. So when you have Bootstrap imported in your project, the moment you do this btn, add this btn class, that is the button class, that is how they defined it. It is going to just define this as a button, that even if this was let's say a span, for instance, you see that there's no difference between the span and the button. The btn class just makes everything a button. Does that make sense? Hello? Are you guys with me? Or should I skip this Bootstrap class?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you can see I have a span now, but it's still being styled as a button. So because it doesn't matter what element I have in my HTML, the moment I define this class, the style for that button already defined in the Bootstrap framework gets applied to it. So let me just go on to show you what the Bootstrap CSS file looks like. So this one is actually minified. What it means is that it has been compressed. So that's what minified means. So you can't actually recognize, you might not be able to recognize the CSS code when you see it, because it has been compressed to, so that it can fit into one file. If not, it's going to be a very long file. You can see it's a very massive, file. So let me just bring this out and put it inside of our initial font or somewhere. Let me just create bootstrap.css. Not CSS. So let me just do this and paste it here. So you can see here it's actually coded along a straight line. Can you see that? So once I save it, it's kind of it comes down. You can see what we have here. So we have all of these stuffs. Can you guys see that? So you see we have classes already defined. So let me just go over to that btn. So you can see the btn primary we applied initially. So you can see the btn primary actually has this kind of, they are using variables here. So it has this color that we saw on that button. Can you see that? Hello? Hello? Are you guys with me? Jesus. Hello. Someone calling. Can you guys hear me? Hello.
Breaking, sir.
Yeah, I think it's
Let us go.
my internet. You guys can hear me now. Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, I said you can see that BTN class we applied before. You can see where the color and everything is coming from, right?
Yes,
BTN primary. So let's just go. So you can see this is the definition, but this is a minified file. What it means is that it has been compressed, basically. So that's what it looks like. So whenever we apply that BTN primary, for instance, so we have BTN, which is the base class, right? Then if I attach BTN primary, you will see that it's actually going to have that blue color. So primary is not the only variant they have. The primary is the blue variant. We also have warning. So you can see that is this yellow variant. Then we have BTN, success, which is green, and we have BTN danger, which is red. You can see that. So all of these have already been predefined. So the moment you understand how the classes work and the class definitions in terms of their naming, then you can always apply them in your project. You don't even have to write, you write your own CSS code. You could just leverage, the framework, and create, a nice looking website without having to write CSS at all. So that's what frameworks are all about. But basically, you definitely will have to write your own CSS because the framework will not give you everything you want. It won't satisfy you 100%. That's why it's very important that you learn your own CSS as well, so that when the BTN, the button, for instance, doesn't look the way you want it to look. Maybe you are working with a UX UI designer, so the button you design doesn't look like any of the buttons, inside of Bootstrap. You have to define your own, right? So, but that's what it's all about. So, button is not the only thing they have. They also have things like carousel sliders, and you can see this. This is where it begins to become interesting. So you have these sliders like what's it called? This kind of stuff that you see on websites where you can click to flip across multiple images. So that's also available in Bootstrap. Can you see that? Hello.
Yes, sir.
So this is
Yes, sir.
available. You know what this does, right? You could
Yes,
use this for an
right.
image gallery and so on. So it's a part of what Bootstrap offers. Bootstrap is not the only CSS framework out there, but it is actually the most popular. And it's actually kind of old-fashioned. Basically, there are newer versions of frameworks that you probably want to learn. But Bootstrap is very easy to learn. So I recommend you start there. And I'm going to do more like an entire class on this later on. But I'm just trying to show you the idea of CDN because I use that avatar icon, and I know it's going to sound very magical because I haven't shown you anything like that before. So there are different components. So you can see we also have badges, we have alerts. So these alerts are such that you can use them to do things like you can use them to display a success message on your website, so you can see. Then you can also close it. Can you see that? So all of these have already been defined. So you just have to copy the way they applied it here and use it for your own purposes. Does that make sense? But the prerequisite is that you have to have the CDN linked inside of your project. Does that make sense? Hello?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, they also have navigation.
Yes, sir.
What is this? My network is actually messing up. So they also have navigation bar like this. You could actually copy this entire thing and then you have a nav bar inside of your project. And this can make you very lazy. So just make sure you avoid it until you know that you are very proficient with your CSS. Avoid it as much as you can. Okay, so that's that about Bootstrap for today. We'll definitely do something about Bootstrap at some point. So we also have dialog boxes. So these are the interesting ones. So dialog boxes are these kind of things that you can pop up on your website. So all of these are will require JavaScript though to work. It's not just because we just imported the CSS of Bootstrap. There's also a JavaScript that you have to import, and then there's jQuery that you have to also import because Bootstrap depends on that to work as well. So let me just get rid of that and let's go back to the project we're having. So at least guys, I think now you should understand where that user icon actually came from, right? The person icon. Now you know where it came from. Hello, I mean this one.
Yes, sir.
So it came from the font awesome library, and the way I applied is because I know that this is the class that actually returns $sign in font awesome, so I used it here. And I know this is the class that returns a person's icon, then I used FA space FA user, and that displayed this. So I didn't have to download any icon inside of my project. I could just use the icons available on Font Awesome directly. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. Okay. Okay, so so that's that. I don't even think we need this actually. Maybe we don't need that. Maybe we need. Okay, we don't need JavaScript for this one even. So let's just keep it this way for now. So okay, there's no tip calculator.js. So let's create a tip calculator.js. So while we are working on this kind of project, let's just import it so that we don't forget. So let's import down the bottom of our I'm importing the tip calculator.js, and let's open the console just to know that it is working. So let's console.log something in tip calculator.js. So let's go to tip calculator.js and let's just do console.log. So now we see it's working. What is this? Okay, logo.svg. So that's on line what? On line 35. Okay, the logo doesn't also exist. So let me just get rid of the logo. I don't actually need it for at this point in time. Or maybe I could just do a very big font awesome icon. So I could do i.fa money. I don't know if that exists in Font Awesome, but let's see. There's only one way to find out. So if you want to be sure of what exists actually, you could always go to Font Awesome, money sign or Font Awesome, whatever it is. So you could go to fontawesome.com, and search for. So I think what they have is dollar bill, which is what I'm looking for. So I think it's dollar bill. So I could search for an icon. So I could say so maybe let's do square dollar. So let's do this. So this is the icon name. So we go to FA. No, I don't think this will be available for free to us. Maybe maybe not. Okay, I think it is available. So let me just copy that and paste it inside of our project and see if it works, because some of the icons are premium actually. So I think this is premium, so it probably will not work. It's not free. So yeah, so I think what we could do is okay, all of these are not free actually. So I'm trying to get a befitting icon for this. So none of these are free. So let me just filter to get the free ones. I think there's a filter, but no. So I just want the free ones. So I think that should solve the problem. So these are the free ones. So let's just let's use this one. So is this free? I think it is. Yeah. And if it doesn't work, so I might just have to use what I already used somewhere else. So I think that's not free as well. So can you guys still hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. This is free. Okay, so let's just use any of this. Got recommended. So let's say top body. So I think you have a top body class defined here. So I could target the icon for the class font size. Okay, maybe so
So are you speaking? I can barely hear you.
no, I'm not speaking at the moment.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, let's just leave this the way it is. So it's not a design class. So we have the JavaScript already working. So when you have this, we know the behavior we want to simulate is that you will enter a bill here. So it could be $100 or 1,000 or whatever it is. Then this is supposed to be an input. Hope you guys are aware of that when you do custom. So it should be an input basically, so that you can enter a custom percentage. So you should also be able to enter the number of people you want. Maybe like, okay, you have $100 bill and you are trying to tip 10% extra of $100 to 10 people. So we want to calculate what each person will get, and then what will be your own total bill if you are going to tip the people for that particular percentage. Does that make sense? So using the case of $100, so let's say we are working with $100. So you are a customer and you are trying to tip the guy at the counter with 10% himself, and maybe 5 other persons, or let's say 10 other persons on duty. So let's say with $100 you're trying to tip 10% of $100. So that's going to be what? 10% of $100 is what? $10, right? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we know once I click on this, so automatically the tip amount is going to be $10 the moment I click on 10%, right? So tip amount will be $10, and then the number of people I specify will now determine the amount per person. That makes sense. So that means amount per person on $10, if there are 10 people, is going to be $1 for each person. That's correct, right? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so basically what we are now trying to look at is we are trying to look at targeting these specific input fields, and then knowing what value is being stored in them. Then we are also targeting each one of these buttons, knowing what value is being stored in each one of them, and then using the value inside of here to and together with the value that is stored here and here to get the values we need here and here, because what we are really looking at is the value we have here and the value we have here. So this will let you know what each person will get, right? Tip amount per person. So that's going to be what? The percentage of whatever the bill is divided by the number of people, which is the value you will have here, right? Then okay.
Yes.
So tip per person will go here, and the total. So the total is going to be the total tip per person. That is, if there were 10 persons with $1 each, so that's going to be 10 plus the bill is going to be the total. That's going to be $110, right? So let's get started with it.
So please, I would like to confirm, is the class recorded?
Yes, it is. And you can still check it too, just to make sure. So let's get started with it, basically. Okay. So is everything set? Hello? Have you guys been able to confirm if the class is still
Oh, I did not have the link.
Yes, it's still recording. Okay. You guys been able to confirm the class? It's still recording.
I'm sorry. That's fine. So let's just get started with it. So basically, there are a couple of things we have to first log. Remember, now I believe you guys know how to target HTML elements using JavaScript. So we have to first target, the input fields. We have to target the buttons and get the value stored inside of the buttons. So we might have to go a little bit slow with this, because the goal is not to finish this thing. If it's to finish it, I can as well just run ahead of it and finish it by myself. But I'm trying to use this to explain a couple of things to you guys. You get it? So try as much as possible to be attentive, and also engage in terms of asking questions when certain things are not clear. So we might not necessarily have to finish this particular project with this class, because along the line I will have to work a couple of things and why certain things are the way they are, and then you are also free to ask questions if the explanations I give are not satisfactory enough to you. So first of all, when you want to start dealing with JavaScript as such, you have to have unique identifiers so that you can target specific elements. So that means you cannot have an input field without an ID field. Does that make sense? So that's the way we can get this exact element. So let's call this exact element build element or build input, right? So for these buttons, let's just let's keep them the way they are for now. We'll come back to that later. So let me just let me collapse that one. So we also have this other one. So this is going to be what? The ID of what? People, right? People input. That makes sense. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
This one will have to have we'll also have to have an ID. So let's call it what do we call that? So we say tip per person element, right? And then this last one, so we'll give it an ID of total. Does that make sense for everyone? So this reset basically is a button, not just anything. Oh, you already have a button, so I think there's no need to put H4 inside of the button. So buttons should just be buttons. You get the point. I see it really makes no difference, right? So I'm going to say reset button. Okay. Is everyone still available, and can everybody still hear me? Hello.
Yeah, yes, sir.
So this what's it called? The middle input that you have. So basically these are buttons. So like I said, you don't really need H4 when you're for the buttons. You don't need that. So just keep the button as buttons. So the last one is not going to be a button though, but for the sake of this, because I know it's supposed to be an input. So that input custom that is written there is going to be the placeholder. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's just while we are here, so let's just say inputs. We're going to say it's type of. So we say no. So we say placeholder is going to be what input. It's going to be what custom. What have I done? Did I scatter something? I've scattered your code, Jesus. Jesus, I don't want to have. Okay, I think that's because I have the input selected. So let me just give it a style of width, and let me say all. If that should fix it. Okay, so I think here's what we do. So we say style of me. Sorry. In the meantime, I just say 10%. So I think it's based on how you defined your grid before. So I think in the meantime, let me just comment this out so it doesn't delay us. I don't want to have to start digging into your CSS. So you did. I think you did justify. So let me just let me target this buttons basically. So let me just target this first buttons. So let me make the color the bright color, so we can go on from there. So I'll worry about the input later. So let's say, sorry, so tip, right? Tip button. So let me just come down here and say maybe dot tip button. So the color is going to be, I don't know what the color you're using for this is. So let me just pick any of these and let's use it out. Okay, so I think something is wrong with the way the button looks. So what are you doing with the upper? So what's the upper class doing basically? Upper button. Why are you setting width and height?
So you said what?
I mean, why did you set width and height for your buttons? You didn't have to.
Okay.
You shouldn't have. But it's fine. So I think that's why we have what we have. So let me just try to. So I think the width and height is just okay. So what we'll do, let's just do a margin. Let's say margin 5 pixels. So we can always see the cities. So upper, okay, you actually group them into two different. So you had upper and lower, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
You could have just used one grid class for it, but it's fine. So I think it's still good thinking. But so let me remove the height for this as well. Let me remove this. Yes. Okay. So I think everything is wrapped inside of one container. I'm just trying to clean it up so get that out of the way. So I think inner body section. So I think this is actually there's something wrong with it, but no problem. I think we can look at that later. So let me just keep it this way later. So I'll leave that as you guys heard it. You have to fix it by yourself. So you fix it on your end. So let's just focus on the JavaScript basically. So okay. So the first thing we need to do, like I said, we let's just first of all target the build input, right? So let's say let's build input, and let's use camel casing. So what is that supposed to be? Document dot get element by ID, and that's going to be equal to what's the class and ID we give to the build input. So we gave it an ID, right? So that's build dash input. That's correct. So the next thing we want to have is we want to also we want to select the buttons, right? We are going to say let me just disable this so it doesn't get in the way. So build input. So we are going to say we also want to have what did we call those buttons, because they are the next in line, right? So we have tip button. So here we'll use a plural word, tip buttons. No, we can't do that in JavaScript. You can't use hyphen. Tip buttons is going to be equal to document.get element by ID. And no, I think that's a class name, right? Okay. So what we could do is we could do document.queryselector all. Remember what I said about queryselector all during the last class we had? Hello? Can anybody remember? Hello?
No, sir. I remember.
Okay, basically what document dot, but you understand what document dot get element by ID does?
Yes, I
Gets
do.
the element with that specific ID. So document dot query selector all. Remember, I'm putting the dot sign to indicate that it's a class selector, right? So that's what query selector does.
Yes.
But when I do query selector all, see what it returns. It returns every element that actually, that has that particular class tip button. So when I save this, so you can see we have 5 elements with that class. Can you see it return all of them? So tip button, so it returned all of them. Can you see that? And it returned them in an array. Can you see that?
Okay.
Yeah. But if I just do document.query selector, it returns only the first one with that class name, which is the one with the 5%. Can you see?
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what query selector all does. So we want to get the tip buttons. So we also want to, okay, for now we are not, let's just exclude the custom tip for now. So let's also select the people input, right? Let's they get element by ID. So we are going to, what do we call the ID of people input? So we called it Jesus Christ. Where is that again? Okay, I think it's here. So people dash input. That's what we called it. So let's just copy it and paste it inside of here. So that means we've selected this element successfully in JavaScript. We selected these buttons, right? And we've also selected this input. And basically, we don't really need to concern ourselves much with this part yet, because if we get this part right, all we need to do with this part is just to display what we've been able to resolve on this part of side of things, right? Hello. So let's worry about this part for now, and let's worry about getting the values right here. Then we can now focus on this other side. So it's going to be a little bit of work. So I'll show you a couple of ways for you to be able to enter values inside of here, and get to find out what values you enter inside of there, for your JavaScript, from what values you entered inside of there from JavaScript, as you type continuously. Does that make sense? Because right now, as I have bill input, definitely I have access to something, and that's what bill value. So I can say let's bill value, because I have to be able to access whatever I write inside of here. Does that make sense? I have to be able to access whatever it is written inside of here. So and I want to call that bill value. So how do I access that? To access bill value, all I need to do is what? Let me first of all console.log bill input, so that we can see everything available on bill input. So instead of doing this, so let me just do okay, let's just do console.log bill input for now. So let's see what I do. So you can see we have this under bill input, right? So if we inspect it, you will see we have a couple of things, but for now we don't really have anything written inside of it. But you can see we have inner HTML, inner text, input node. So but there's another property that the element has, and that property is called value. So that value is going to be whatever you write inside of here. So let's say you write 10 here, for instance, and obviously we are not writing anything at the moment. We've not written anything at the moment, so it's always blank whenever our page refreshes, so we can't get to see that. But let me just say, you can see everything gets wiped out, and then we have this kind of business. So but this is the element basically, and then we know that we have a value field. So that value is how you actually target the value of what's written in the input field. So let's do this for now. So let's say the build value is going to be build input dot value. You have that, it's available. No. Okay, so dot value. So let's do console.log. Are you guys with me? Please follow me closely. Console.log build value. So you can see we really have nothing inside of build value. But let me go to the HTML and let me do value equals 10. Okay, I'm actually targeting this is for people, right? So let me target for the billing, which is where we are at. So this is billing. So let me set the value. So you can see now that when I console.log the value of billing, it actually brought out 10 here, because I had coded them 10 here. Can you see? So if I change this to 20, you can see that the input of value, bill input of value. Bill input is what? The entire element. then I know the entire element because of the document object model, right? Document object model means everything is technically an object. Is that correct? Everything is an object. So what that means is that I can, with the dot notation or the bracket notation, access properties of everything using the dot notation. Hello? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now you understand how I arrived at build value.input. Do you understand how I got here? It's going to be a great thing if you don't understand and I'm going on with this. Do you understand how I got
Professor,
here?
please can you come again?
Okay. Remember,
Like just come.
okay. What's the fundamental, what should be at the back of your mind whenever you're writing JavaScript? It is that you are writing an object-oriented programming language. And what that means is that you treat everything as an object. And what is the most important things about object? It is that they have what? Property value pairs, right? So for every property, there's a value. For every property, there's a value. So the way we establish the relationship or we access the value of every property inside of an object is using either the bracket notation or the dot notation. Do you remember that? Hello?
Yes, sir.
So the bracket notation is when you do something like this. Okay. Then you do property name, right? Right? While the dot notation is when you do the objects dot the property, right? But both of these, when you have the object, right, the object you are referencing is what I mean here. It could be any object. So in this case, the object we are referencing is what? The build input. Isn't that correct? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we now know that build input has some couple of properties under it, and one of them is what? Value. Hello? So Yetunde, is that clear? Hello?
I've been shouting yes, I didn't know my mic was not
Okay.
on mute.
So it's clear now. So let's just get rid of that now. So now we've been able to access the value of our build input. So, but that's still not enough. But it's a good place to be. So we've been able to get the value of that. So all we need to do is let's also establish the value of this, or maybe let's focus on having to change this on the fly and having our program responders to change it on the fly, because at the moment it is only the 20 we had coded that is being displayed. Nothing else is being displayed. Can you see that? We have to be able to listen for that and change it as the program runs, or as we type into the field. We have to be able to get the most current value, because now it doesn't get the most current value. It only gets the one that has been predefined, which is what we had here before. We had 20 predefined, so that's the only one it is getting. Does that make sense? Hello? Do you guys understand what I just explained? Hello? Hello?
Hello, sir.
Do you guys understand what I just explained? If you don't understand, you ask. What is not clear? Is it what I tried to say last?
I think I understand it. I understand most of it.
Okay. Most of it. So which part is not clear? Okay, that's fine. So while we are here, if you guys don't stop me, I'll just continue talking. That's fine. I'll assume everybody understands. So while we are here, this input has a type of text. That means even alphabets will enter into it. And we are not trying to calculate, there's no way we can calculate percentages from alphabets, except if you understand some kind of alien mathematics. But what we need to do here is to primarily change this to a type of number. And once we do that, we shouldn't be able to enter, what's it called? Alphabet inside of it. So I'm actually typing a lot of alphabets now, but it doesn't work. But once I type in numbers, it works. Does that make sense? And you can see we also have this
Yes.
default HTML, what's it called? But we don't need that because we might have to hide it with CSS. That's hideable, but let's leave it there for now, right? So we've been able to target this in HTML. So what I'm saying is only the value we predefine is actually getting displayed. So at the moment we don't have any value predefined. So on line 10 we are doing a console.log, but nothing is being displayed. So nothing is being displayed. So that brings us to the subject of events in JavaScript. So events are basically, the user is just basically the keyword for, the various categories of engagement the user will have with your, with the browser. And those engagement include clicking, scrolling, pressing the keyboard down and so on. Does that make sense? So there are different kinds of events. So we have changing events for input field, we have clicking events for buttons, we have different kinds of events. So since we have an input field, we have to be able to listen for a change event. Does that make sense? Or an input event. Are you guys with me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So the moment we do for the input event, so the moment we begin to listen for the input event, whatever value that is being entered into the input field, we can always get it. Does that make sense? So for that, so we are going to do we are going to target that element, and that element is what? Build input, right?
Yes, sir.
Build input dots. So what we want to do is there's a method available, and that's add event listener. So this method. So we want to add an event listener. So the event we are listening to, you can see we have some series of events here. We have abort, block and play, click, close, copy, queue, db. So these are all events. We even have drag events. So when you drag an element, and that's why you're able to do drag and paste, drop in a place, then it uploads a file for you. So we have key down, key press, key up, and so on. So there are different kind of events that you can listen to. Some of them are not. For instance, the play event, for instance, is basically for media elements like the video elements or the audio tag. So you can't use it. You can't always use all events for all kind of elements. But what we are looking for now is this element here, and that's the what's it called? I think we have it here. So we have this input. So can you see appends an event listener for event whose type attribute blah blah blah. So it just tells you what the event listener does. So for the input, we actually have we are listening for input event. So the second argument this will take is going to be a function. So we can say function. Let's use this kind of function keyword. So we are going to pass in a function. So we pass in the event we are trying to listen for. So we are going to say this. So what we'll do is inside of that, what's it called? Inside of this, we are now going to define what we want. So let's just say we want to do console.log events, right? So let's see what happens now. So let's save. So once I type here, let's see what happens. So you can see we are having a couple of changes inside of our inside of our console based on this line 11, and this is from line 11. So you can see we have a couple of things here. So you see we have e.target now. So there's an event basically, and that event is global to your browser. But we are trying to narrow the event down. So the event has a target. What current element are we on that is making this change? So that is your target. And then we now have what? Inside of that target, we have another, important keyword inside of the target, and that is the, let me just scroll over there. That's the value keyword. So when you have that,
Can anybody hear me, or is it just me?
I can't
Yeah,
hear
it's
you.
not just.
You guys can't hear me.
Yes.
I can't hear you.
The network is bad.
Wow. Is the YouTube still working? Please check.
Yes, it's still working.
Okay. So we have that event. So inside of the event, what we just want to do is there are a couple of things that we can look out for. So let me just show you what I mean. So we have this target. So inside of the target, we have a couple of properties. And one of the properties we have inside of the target is, let me just kind of go down there. So we have the target. So there are still more basically. So I'm trying to get you the one that actually shows. So you can see we have the value, e.target.value gives you what we wrote here, right? Can you see that? So we can do event.target.value. So when we do a console.log event.target.value, just watch what happens now. So whatever I write here will get logged into the console. Can you see that? So we are getting the real-time value of the input feed at this point in time. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so what we can do now is
Yes,
that
sir.
this our build value, instead of setting it to build value dot build input dot value, what we need to set it to now, we can now do, remove all of this and now say let what we can say build value, right, will be equal to what e dot target dot value. Does that make sense? Are you getting it?
Why did you Why did you remove it from there?
Remove it from where?
Why did you remove the view let's be value? Why did you remove it from there?
And because the one I declared before, I did equals build input dot value, and we know that build input dot value has no predefined value. It's just an empty string, right? We didn't even we just declared an empty string, right? So there's no value inside of it. So when we type, the browser is already loaded the page, so we don't get access to making any changes anymore. So we have to be able to listen to the onInput event, and with the onInput event we want to listen for the most current input of this field and then set build value to that instead of setting it to this static value of build input dot value. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Does it make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we did e.target. So this is not e.target, basically it's supposed to be event.target because I declared it here. And you can call this anything you want. You can call it e. I usually call it e, that's why I decided to say e. So it's basically the current event. So the current event will have a couple of properties inside of it, and that's what I was trying to show you here when I did console.log e, for instance. So let me just write one here, just one. So you can see we have input event here in our console. That is the event we are talking about. So that event has, it's basically an object. You can see there are curly braces and we have property value pairs. So if you scroll down, we have a particular property called target, and that target is the specific element that you are, that event is being triggered from. Does that make sense? Hello? And you can see the IDs here, input, build input. That is the target. Can you see that? That's why if I type here, you see nothing is happening in the console because I'm not targeting this particular field. This is the field I'm targeting. It is this field, build input dot add event listener. So I've added an event listener to build input. Does that make sense? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so there's a property here and that's called target. So that target is what gives me access to whatever I write inside of here. So let me see what's available on that target. We have different things available. We have align, alt, and blah blah blah. So let's not worry about all of that. So there's something we are looking for, and that is the value property. So the value property gives us the real-time value of what is currently inside of that particular input field, that is the event's target. So you can see now we have one inside of the value field, which is what we wrote inside of here. So that's why I said e.target.value is the value of our what build value, which is what the input.value. Does that make sense? Hello?
Sir, please come again.
Okay, but you understand what I meant when I talked about events?
Targets. This value part is where I don't really get.
Okay, value is basically one of the properties available under the target property.
Yes.
On the event object. Do you understand that? So the target itself is the element that the event is being triggered from. So if this was a button, the target would have been that button. If this was an H3 element, the target would have been that H3 element. Does that make sense? So we are adding the event listener. So the event's target is the build input, not the people input, not the tip buttons, but the what? Build input. That is where the event listener is being triggered from. So that event's target is what? That element that it is being triggered from. Does that make sense? And that's why if I close this and I make a couple of changes here, see nothing is happening in our console. But the moment I come to this one, we start having activity. You get it? Because this is the target. Hello.
Okay.
So you understand what I'm talking about? So it's just
Yes,
more
sir.
like that's where the user is, engaging with at a particular point in time, because event listeners are basically about engagement, user engagement. So now we are setting, build input, build value rather to the value of that target, and that's, of course, input fields usually have input fields do have value, right? So and that value is what we are actually using at the moment. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's fine. Sorry, I think my phone is ringing. Please, once I get to an overwhelming point, let me know. I don't want to overload you guys with information. I believe I've already said, a whole lot today already. So, like I said, the goal is not to finish this project at one go. It's for us to be able to, learn a lot of things as we are trying to solve the problems in the project. Does that make sense? So, does
Yes.
everyone in this class at this moment understand what it means when I said, event listeners or events in the browser?
Yes, sir. I do for me.
Yeah. So, and it's also very important for you to understand that this input event is just one kind of event. We have many other types of events. We have the click event, we have key press down event, key up event, change event, scroll event. There are different events, many of them. We have play events for multimedia elements like videos, input, and so on. So there are different events. So the one we are engaging with at this level, because we are engaging with an input field, is the input event. So whenever the user inputs, we are, listening to the event, and we are targeting the value that is being emitted from that event. Does that make sense? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now we have our build value set. So the next thing we have to target is now, we have to also create an event, on our button, so that whenever we click on our button, we get the appropriate, action and activity from, the clicking of our button. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And this project is actually, there's a lot to do on this project. So, and that's why I don't want to rush it, because there's so much more to teach you in terms of validation, having to do a couple of other things, because what we are doing is actually the barest minimum of what we need to do. So, but I need you guys to really understand that before we go on. Does that make sense? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what we are going to do here now, remember, we have the tip buttons, and what we are using here is not get element by ID. We are using what?
Queryselector.
Query selector all. And what does query selector all return? It returns an array, right, of all the elements
Yes.
with that selector. And in this case, what's the selector? In this case,
Tip dash button.
eh?
Tip dash button.
Yeah, tip that button. That. So we have a couple of elements. I think there are about 5 of them, right? This. So 5, 10, 15, 25, 50. So we have 5 elements, And what we need to do, we need to actually utilize an array method to add, an event listener to this particular, button, to this set of buttons rather. So let me just remove this. So now we know that our value is intact here. So let me remove this. So let's say current build value. No, I need to remove this, because the moment I said that. So let me just, and it doesn't even matter if I remove it, because the moment I trigger this event, it overwrites whatever I said here. But I don't have to initialize it, since there's no value in the first place to start with. So let's say build value, right? So we are updating it here. So let's see. Make sense? So listening to input event from build input element, from the build input element. Okay. So we have let's also listen to what? To click events on the tip. So let's be consistent. So let me just do this. then okay. So what we need to do here is to do what? Tip, right? Buttons, dots. So what we need to do, you can see because it knows it's an array. So you see it's giving us array methods here out of the box. Can you see that? So all we need to use here is actually for each. I remember what for each does. I hope you guys remember what for each does. What does for each do? Hello? Can anybody remember?
So is that not under the for loop?
And these are array methods. I remember when I talked about higher order array methods. So for each is an higher order array method. And what that means is that they are methods basically that can take in higher methods.
Okay.
Okay, is that clear now? So for each actually loops over, it's almost equivalent to what the for loop does. But this doesn't, take in the, I keyword, and you don't have to declare some variables like let I equals 0, while I equals this. You get the point? So it just goes over every element inside of your array. And this doesn't, it's not the legacy, for loop, but it's basically a, more like a superset of the for loop. It's more like an advanced way of using the for loop. So let's just start, and first parameter, the argument you pass in is going to be what you want each element to be called. And I taught you guys this before. You guys used to forget about it. It was actually so just you guys can remember this for each method. Hello. Okay.
I can't remember.
I've taught you most of them, but I taught you map. As a matter of fact, I taught you all of these array methods on one particular.
Because you said it execute a function for each element.
Yeah. Please go and look at it again, or you can read about it. I could leave you some articles to read about to understand them again.
Okay, sir.
So, but you can check the video because I think we did a couple of examples in the video. Just with them.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so and what we need to do is run a loop. So instead, here we are dealing with just one element, but here we are dealing with more than one element. So we are still having, we are still adding an event listener, but we are adding an event listener for each button because they share similar class names. And what we would have done was to kind of listen for each click events on each one of these buttons. So this is kind of a little bit advanced, but let's just do it. But if it's not clear, we revert to the primitive method of doing it. So let's get started with that. So let's say btn dot add event listener. So we're adding event listener. So the event listener we're adding is going to be click, right? So we are going to say function again, and don't worry, we will always refactor this. So we say event. So the event is going to be let's say console.log event.targets. And this is a button, so it doesn't have value. It's only inputs that have value. So let's try to look at event.target and see what that gives to us. So let's do E here. Oh, I said function. I spelled it wrongly. Function. So I think event should actually work. There's no problem with the event word. So let me keep calling it events until you guys understand it better. I would have said E. So let's say once I click on any of these buttons, I think I should get that action. So you can see we have this button, the one with 5%. So you can see we have the one with 10%, we have the one with 15, we have the one with 20, we have the one with 50. So you can see what's going on here. I'm listening for a click event, and you can see what is happening here. Hello.
Yes, sir.
So there's a property here and it's called inner HTML, I guess, if I'm not wrong. So let's see what that returns. If it doesn't return undefined, so you can see it gives us what is inside of the button. So we can now use this value. Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So is what I'm doing clear so far? I'm talking about in terms of
Yes.
event listing.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, you understand what I
Yes,
mean.
sir.
Okay, so
Yes.
that's good. I'm happy you understand. So it's not actually difficult. You can see these things are not difficult. It's just something that you have to kind of go over multiple times so that you can understand it. Like it's not something that is very hard to get. They are actually very basic things that are basically built on what you already know, right? So it's just for you to take out the time to rehearse them and learn and practice with them over and over. Then you can master them. So we have on the click event, we are doing a console log and we are getting the inner HTML. Of course, we know we cannot do mathematical operations with this percentage sign, appended to our, what's it called, to our element. So what we also want to do is we want to be able to add, an active class or an inactive class. I don't know if you have an active class defined here to me. An active
For
class means the particular one I select should have a different kind of style, more like maybe a white color or something like that, so that I can know which one is currently being selected.
no, I think everything is carrying the same style.
Okay,
It's carrying
so let me just say, for the sake of time, so let's just say button. So the button that has an active class, so we are going to give it so let's test what that would look like. So let's say so it will look like this when it's active. It kind of just did the same thing. I think I just so let me make it brighter here, and then let me make this darker. So button not active. Why is that not working? Okay, I think. Okay, you can see. So we have this, right? So when it's active, it looks like that. So what we want to do basically, and in order to make this cleaner and make it more elaborate, so here's what we can do. We don't have to define, and this is called a callback function. What a callback function is, whenever you have a higher order function like this, like the add event listener. So you can have one argument that you're passing, and then you have the second one as a function that does something with the initial, that is the initial argument you passed in. So that's what a callback function is. So when you call a function, the function that returns something based on the original function you called is called a callback function. So what we need to do is, let's get rid of this function from inside of here and just declare a new function somewhere underneath. So let's just call this handle, let's call it handle click, handle click event to make it more clear. So let's say we have function, handle click event, and we're just going to pass in what we had before. So let me just remove this. So let me remove this as well. So let me just get rid of all of this. So let's see what happens, and let me just do a console log of this is okay. So when I click again, we should get this is handle clicking. So regardless of which one I click, I can see we got it 6 times. So it still works, right? Hello.
Why did we get it 6 times, sir? Did you click it 6 times?
Yes, I clicked each one of them. They all work in similar ways. You get, so
Okay.
as long as I click, I keep getting it. So what we want to do first of all is, let's handle the active class. And don't worry. I know it might be overwhelming. Hello, are you guys still with me?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, we already have what's it called, tip buttons, which is this, right? So let's say we have tip button. So we are still going to be doing for each again. So we want to handle the active class. We want to know which one has the handle class, active class, and then remove the active class from it. Then we can apply to the one that we are currently clicking on. If not, everything will have the active class. So we can say btn dot, there's something called class list, right? So if I say console.log btn.class list, so let me just do that. So you can see it will show you all the classes available on that btn element. So you can see it shows you have tip button and active class applied on the first one. Then on the second one you have tip button, then tip button. You get the point. So it just shows you the number of classes you have applied on an element. So here it tells you have just one class applied. Here you have two classes applied, tip button and active class applied. Does that make sense? Hello.
Yes, sir.
So you can see these are just basically what you've learned before in terms of using object, accessing object properties. And keep it at the back of your mind that everything basically is an object when you're dealing with JavaScript. It might give you type of string, type of this, but under the hood, like in the background, everything is being treated as an object. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So let's say btn, btn, that's what we are calling each one, right? Class list. And you know what I mean by what we are calling each one? So you see these tip buttons we have here. The moment we do for each, and we put in a function here, the argument we pass in here is what each one will be called. Is the equivalent of doing tip at the index of I inside of your for loop. Does that make sense? So under class list we also have another method, and that method is called add. And what that does is it can add a new class. Does that make sense? So but in this case we first want to check if that class exists on any initial one they want to remove it. So we'll say remove class, right, on each of them. So the class we want to remove is what's it called? Tip button, right? That's what we call it. No, that's not what we want to remove. Oh, the class we want to remove is active, right? Because that's the active class. So let me just remove that from here so that it doesn't always persist, because if it's there it's going to cause a problem in our program. So we are removing the active class. So let me save this. You can see that. Okay, let me just go on here. Let me try and do this. So let me click. You can see it has removed that class from this one. Can you see? Hello, did you guys see that? We have the active class here. Let me just click on it. You can see we have active here. So the moment I click on any of the buttons, you see that this active class will be gone. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's what it means when I say remove class. Whatever class I remove from here is going to get removed actually. But let me just remove this one so that it doesn't get selected by default. Or we could select it by default, but let's just leave it this way for now. Do you guys understand what I'm doing so far?
Yes, sir, but it's a lot to take in.
Okay, don't worry, I will stop very soon so that you guys can have the time to just check this, so that you can come up with whatever questions you have to come up with. So let's set active state. Set current button as active, right? That is add active class. To the currently click button. You know what that means now? Hello. So what we want to do is we'll use a conditional. So we want to check if the element that we currently clicked on, doesn't have the active class, then we apply it. So we say if. Are you guys with me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think at this point we have to just kind of pass in the we have to use the event parameter now. Does that make sense? It's available here. It will be added to it by default, because if you don't pass in the event like we passed in here, we cannot access the current target. Does that make sense? So we have to be able to access the current target. So what we are going to do here is inside of here we just pass in that event. By default it is being passed in from here. Remember, we are putting this function here, and that's the replacement to us having to write all of this thing inside of here. Does that make sense? It's still the same thing. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, don't worry. Just pay keen attention if you don't understand anything, just let me know. So we'll say event dot remember, whenever we are trying to target a particular element, we do event dot target, right? That's the current element being engaged, right, or being used by this. So we say in HTML Hello.
Yes, sir.
So I need to make sure that you guys are with me. So inner HTML, then we are going to, we are still inside of this loop. You remember, we are inside of this for loop. So we want to check if the current button we are clicking, that is event.target.html, is equal to the current button that we are clicking. Then how we know that is if what is inside of the button, that is the inner HTML, that is the value inside of this one, inside of the button that we are targeting, is equal to the value of the button that we are currently inside of our loop. And then that's worthy. So inner HTML, then what we want to do in that case is, if they are equal, then we want to apply our class. We want to apply the active class. We want to say btn dot add class, dot class list dot add. Remember, we removed it before, but now we are adding, so we want to add active. Hello.
Please come again, sir. If event target dot inner
Remember what
HTML is equal.
Yeah. Do you know what event.target means now?
Yes, yeah, I understand.
That is the current element you are engaging with. Yeah?
Yes.
And remember, we are in a loop, right?
Yes.
So the loop is will go over because we have 5 tick buttons. So it will run 5 times. So for every time it runs, it will check if the button we clicked on, which is this one, is equal to the current button in the loop. And we will compare that is by comparing the inner HTML of both of them, because that's the only different thing amongst them. Every other thing is similar, right? Only the inner HTML, which is the value written, is what is different. So whenever it is not equal, it will not apply the active class. But whenever it encounters the one that the inner HTML is equal to the inner HTML of the button, then it applies the active class. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's click now and see. So you can see it applies it to that, applies it to this, applies it to this, applies it to this. I can see that. Hello. Can you see it now?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Is it clear? Okay.
Okay. I guess it's so, sir, what we did was that we created a class in our HTML as active.
In our CSS.
So, okay.
You can see that class I created it. Whenever there's a button that has a .active class, then it should apply this style to it. So we didn't really add it to HTML. I added it initially, but I removed it. So there's no button here amongst this button that has that active class. But in JavaScript, we are programmatically adding it to it whenever we click. So that's what you see on website when you see active link. Whenever you see home is active, and then that home is different from the other links, or about us, or so on. So it's the same, a similar kind of logic they use to apply that. Does it make sense for everybody?
Yes, sir.
Abigail, okay, top is no longer called Laura. Does it make sense for you too?
It's a bit fuzzy. Like this event.target.inner HTML.
Yeah.
So you said if it is equal to, like, because of the loop, if it is equal to btn.html, that's when this active class would pass on the code. Or if it's not equal to it, that means this active class will not work on it, like it will not run.
Yeah.
But from what you've done, event.target.inner HTML is always equal to btn.inner HTML.
But you know that there are 5 tick buttons, right? So it can only be equal to one of them, and that one of them is what we are interested in. You get? You remember that Queryselector all returns an array of all the elements with this particular selector.
Yes.
So we are looping over all of them, and for every iteration we have a single one of them that we are comparing with the event.target.inner HTML.
So that means for every iteration, this event.target.inner HTML will change as well.
Yes, it will only be equal to one of them. Does that make sense? It is only when we click on this, it is only when we click that this logic runs. This logic does not run continuously. It only runs when we click. So while we click is when all of those things are happening. So let me just show you what I mean by now. So let me do a console.log of btn, for instance. So you see, when I do a console.log of btn, we get btn 5 times. Can you see? We get 5 btns. Can you see that? Hello?
Yes.
So let me also
Yes.
do a console.log of this event.target.inner.html. You see that we get the very same element for those 5 times. So let's say current button, right? That's what
Okay.
event.target returns. So it returns the current button. So we say this one is going to be so I think we stop somewhere around here. So you don't have information, is you information overload, or what do you call it. So let me just click on this and watch well, so you can see what is happening. All buttons we have 5. Current button is what? 5. All buttons we have 10. Current button remains what? 5.
5.
All buttons we have 15. Current button remains what? 5. So it doesn't matter how many we have, it will only match with the one that it is equal to. So the inner HTML of this and the inner HTML of the e.target is what we are comparing. So it doesn't matter how many we have, it will only give the active class to the element that has the equality condition met. Does that make sense now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank God. Thank you, Holy Spirit. Okay, so so that makes sense now. So let's see. Okay, I think we should stop here, or you think we should go on? I think it's almost 9, so that means the class is already over 1 hour 30 minutes. So I think we should stop here. Then we'll continue from here tomorrow. But I think you've learned a lot, and I'm sure you already have your mind open to a lot of things at this point in time. You can already start imagining how things work, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's the
sir.
goal. So I think we can stop here tonight, right? So we continue from here tomorrow, so I don't end up, because I know all of this actually a lot to take in, so you can have the time to actually ruminate over there. So I won't be dropping the code. Watch the YouTube and try to code along.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, so I think that will be more helpful. So is that okay for
Yeah.
everyone? Is there any question at this point in time? Hello?
None from me, sir.
Okay, that's fine. Abigail, what about you?